Hi, welcome back to Ask a Monk. Next question comes from Night Goat. Please discuss the idea of God in Buddhist thinking. We are taught that the Buddha was not a prophet of God, as in Western traditions, but to whom are the prayers of Buddhists offered? Clarify the meaning of Prajao and how it fits with Buddhism. Prajao just means Lord, or in this case, God, so it's a Thai word. I'm assuming Night Goat is Thai or has some connection with Thailand. Buddhists don't believe in a creator God. The biggest problem that we have with a creator God is the same problem that the Greeks had, and it's a really an old problem that I think is never it's not possible to answer. It's not possible to give an adequate answer, and it's the problem of suffering. There's a really good book by Bart Ehrman called God's Problem, and I really suggest anyone interested in this subject take it up. The gist of the problem is, if God is all powerful, then why is there suffering? Why is there evil in the world? If God is all powerful and all loving, and there are ways of twisting out of this. But if you read this book, this book God's Problem is written by an ex-pastor who was a very devout Christian. He's one of the leading Bible scholars in the world, but he doesn't believe in God, and he has this is one of the biggest reasons, the biggest problems for all of us, is that there's no reason for us. If there's someone who created, as the Buddha said, if there's someone who created the universe, then he's guilty, or that being is guilty of for all of the crimes of humanity, all of the suffering that exists in the world. In Buddhism, we understand there to be many levels of reality, many types of being, just as there are many types of mind. And so there are beings called Brahmas, and these, I would always translate them as gods. I don't think there's anything wrong with that sort of translation, because they are, the higher beings, and they're what we normally think of as a god. They haven't created the world, though. There's an interesting story that the Buddha gives that seems to be quasi-historical, or it seems to be a historical account of why people might think that God created the universe, and why God himself, or certain gods might think that as well. Why this belief exists, and it exists on the level of gods themselves, or angels even, because there are many levels. So suppose a god up at this level, gods up at this level who aren't in touch with the lower realms. One of them dies, so to speak, or moves down to a lower level that is in touch with the world. Suddenly, or not suddenly, but over time, he forgets about his past lives, or depending on the state, no longer remembers the past, and as a result thinks, oh, I'm the only one, and this is like back before there were beings, after the Big Bang, at the end of one of the last cycles, in the beginning of this cycle, he's the first one to come down. So he thinks, I am, in the beginning there was one, or there was nothing. And then he thinks to himself, boy, wouldn't it be nice if there was something, or he gets kind of bored. And after some time, light arises, or more beings come down. And so he attributes himself to be the cause, and to be the creator. And this might seem like a fantastical story and nothing to do with reality, but think about it. This is how superstition arises. This is how religion is created. It's false attribution of a cause. We want something to happen. It happens. And then we think, what was I doing when I wanted it to happen? Maybe I had a horseshoe, or maybe I had a rabbit's foot. And I think, well, that means horseshoes are lucky. If you're rubbing a rabbit's foot, it's lucky. Why? Because I've seen it. When I rub the rabbit's foot, good things happen to me. It's false attribution, and this is what the Buddha, he goes back and talks about how this is, this is why many gods think that they're the creators. Human beings get the same problem. they can go into meditative states and suddenly think they're a prophet because they can talk to angels and talk to gods, who then tell them, I'm the creator, I am the one, I am the Brahma, and so on and so on. And they can remember past lives. Many prophets, remember being up in heaven and say, I was sent by God, I had to come down, my mission wasn't finished, and so on and so on. So I would say there's a lot of that in the religious traditions, and because these people tend to be strong-minded, they make very charismatic leaders, and they can be very convincing, because they have some connection with the other worlds, with angels and with gods. They themselves believe it, and these gods and angels are deluded in and of themselves, thinking, having the various views of their own. So it all perpetuates itself. This is a Buddhist explanation of where God comes from, believe it or not. A more secular explanation would be in terms of false attribution of cause. When we, the rain falls and we attribute it to this or that action of ours and so on, and then we start to think, well, God likes me and God doesn't like me and so on. And this is all part of it. But I would say from a Buddhist point of view, why we believe in God in general is because we remember these things. We remember these other worlds, and we have some kind of innate understanding of these levels. We just don't have an understanding of the truth of them. That even gods and angels are impermanent, being born and dying, going up and down. The other part of the question, I think, is much more interesting, and that is the idea of prayer. Buddhists don't pray, as far as some Buddhists do pray, but it's not a very Buddhist thing to pray. What we do in Buddhism, and it's often mistaken for prayer, is we resolve on certain things. We make a determination. We make a wish, if you will. And we do this to establish our minds and to set our minds on what we want to occur. We say to ourselves, may this happen, may I be happy, may I be able to attain this or that state. We can even do it with mundane things. May my parents, may their sickness disappear, or this or that. If someone is sick, making something like a prayer. But the idea of a prayer is it has power. Your mind is fixed, is focused. The faith in your mind is calming and tranquilizing and establishing the mind firmly. So it's not the fact that you're praying to someone, it's the fact that you're making a determination. You're resolving in your mind for this to happen. You're making a wish, and that wish is going to form at least a part of your reality, and it's going to have an effect. And it can often help, if your mind is strong enough, it can help to change the world around you. This is a very important part of Buddhist practice. It's something that we use in our meditation. I have this problem, may I become free from this problem. May I attain this or that. If you want to become a monk, may I have the opportunity to become a monk. If you want to go to do a meditation course, may all of the obstacles in my way disappear, and may I be successful in this or that endeavor. This is totally valid, and it's nothing to do with another being coming down and giving you, blessing you with the results of your wish or the answer to your prayers. It has to do with your changing of reality, and in a very mundane sense, it's simply your intention in achieving that goal, which focuses your mind and puts you on that path and propels you along it. So that's where prayer might come close to Buddhism. Again, it's not prayer, but when you see people praying for this, wishing for this or wishing for that, you can understand that if they've got their head on straight, if they're really following the Buddha's teaching, then they're not expecting the Buddha to give them the wish, and they're not expecting anything from God. They are just resolving for that, and in some way it can affect the universe as well, but mostly it's just going to set their minds on it and will help them to achieve their goals. A final note about the Buddha: why we don't expect the Buddha to help us is because the Buddha's passed away. And by passed away, we mean he hasn't been born, he wasn't born again. Whereas when we pass away, we don't really pass away, we just continue on. But for someone who has attained nirvana, when they pass away, they pass away. And so the Buddha, you could say he's still in Kusinara in India. That was where he passed away. And by passed away, the technical meaning is he went inside. The mind stopped coming out. The mind ceased to arise, ceased to see, hear, smell, taste, feel, or think. So in a sense, you could say the Buddha's, there in Kusinara, but is not coming out anymore. The mind is not arising. There's no more opportunity for it to arise. So we say really passed away, and there's no chance for the Buddha to hear your prayers or answer them. At least not the Buddha who's not the Buddha. There are many beings in Buddhism that are said to answer prayers, but that's a whole other another can of worms. And I guess that does it has to be admitted that yes, you can wish for things and ask for the angels and gods to help you. The problem is you don't know whether they're going to help you or not, and it's completely up to them. There is no being out there who is purely compassionate and wise and is going to answer all of your prayers. There's a lot of beings out there who are going to pose in that role and instead wind you around their finger and twist your will to theirs, and you'll find yourself following them. And that's, I think, the case with many meditators. When they get caught up with angels and other beings, they find that rather than the angels and gods serving them, they wind up serving these beings and following after all of their defilements and their illusions and delusions as well. Okay, so I hope that gives an answer. It's a very interesting question, and I'd like to encourage everyone to make these determinations, especially after you practice, and especially in regards to your own happiness and the happiness of your fellow beings. May all beings be happy.